For much of the 20th century, most scholars agreed that the 5 books of the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers and Deuteronomy, came from 4 sources: the Yahwist, the Elohist, the Deuteronomist and the priestly source, known as the documentary hypothesis. Each source was held to tell the same basic story, with the sources later joined together by various editors. Since the 1970s, however, there has been a revolution in this line of thought, leading scholars to view the Elohist source as no more than a variation on the Yahwist, and the priestly source as a body of revisions and expansions to the Yahwist, or non-priestly material. The Deuteronomistic source does not appear in Genesis. Scholars use examples of repeated and duplicate stories to identify separate sources. In Genesis, these include 3 different accounts of a patriarch claiming that his wife was his sister, the 2 creation stories, and the 2 versions of Abraham sending Hagar and Ishmael into the desert. This leaves the question of when these works were created. Scholars in the first half of the 20th century concluded that the Yahwist source was a product of the monarchic period, specifically at the court of Solomon, 10th century BC, and the priestly work a product of the middle of the 5th century BC, with claims that the author was Ezra. However, more recent thinking is that the Yahwist source dates to from either just before or during the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC, and that the priestly final edition was made late in the exilic period or soon after. The almost complete absence of all the characters and incidents mentioned in primeval history from the rest of the Hebrew Bible has led a sizable minority of scholars to conclude that these chapters were composed much later than those that follow, possibly in the 3rd century BC. As for why the book was created, a theory which has gained considerable interest, although still controversial, is that of Persian imperial authorization. This proposes that the Persians of the Achaemenid Empire, after their conquest of Babylon in 539 BC, agreed to grant Jerusalem a large measure of local autonomy within the empire, but required the local authorities to produce a single law code accepted by the entire community. The 2 powerful groups making up the community, the priestly families who controlled the Second Temple and who traced their origin to Moses and the wilderness wanderings, and the major landowning families who made up the elders and who traced their own origins to Abraham, who had given them the land, were in conflict over many issues, and each had its own history of origins. However, the Persian promise of greatly increased local autonomy for all provided a powerful incentive to cooperate in producing a single text.